Hey everyone, and welcome to the Pearls of Wisdom podcast, episode 4, where we're going to be talking about healing through writing with the lovely Evie McCrae. I'm Peter Williams, your host, and it's a pleasure to have you here. So I've got to say, it's so wonderful that I have you here. So I've got to give a couple of rundowns and a couple of pointers to our listeners and our watchers because forewarning for those who know Geminis, okay, and those people know I'm a Gemini. Evie is a Gemini herself, so we like to keep things and keep people on their toes. And what I mean by this is that Evie is an awesome professional, and she's obviously got pen names and all the rest of it, which is kind of cool. But Evie McCrae is her professional name, but of course her name is also is Evie Pinchler, so which is Norwegian, which is really cool. There's a story in itself which we'll get to in a second. But before I do get Evie on and saying hello here with us, I just want to just show you the wealth of knowledge and experience this lady really has. So she is a former deputy editor of Natural Health and Wellbeing. Okay, she's been a freelancer writer across international titles in the UK and Australia as well. She's been a senior copywriter and has held leadership positions in brand and marketing and communications for global brands. It's like her wealth is just amazing. But what's absolutely fascinating is that I have crossed paths with Evie, obviously, who has been a massive influence of getting my own book, Searching Spirit, across the line, getting it done, getting it finished in itself, which is really fascinating because, as you know, it's coming from a very spiritual twist. So, but before we get into this, I just, of course, big, huge welcome and thank you so much for joining us for this episode, Evie. It's such a pleasure to have you on here. I know this is outside your comfort zone, but thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to talk about what's essentially my passion, my life's passion, and well, actually two passions, and they join together. So yeah, I hope by the end of this session, there'll be a few people ready to get on that journey and write their story too.
Yeah, well, this is interesting. Writing is a passion, but this is really interesting. When we go through that list, honestly, I don't even want to call it a bio. Realistically, that's a curriculum vitae in itself. But it does mean the experience, the wealth of knowledge, and of course, that's global. It's not just Australia based, it's across the world. But it's really interesting. So you've come from a very professional writing background, which is wonderful. But it's all of a sudden now you're starting to bridge, and obviously we've connected up and you're connected in the very spiritual sense. So it's really interesting. So how would you describe to someone, and talking to our viewers now and our listeners, how would you say you position yourself now as a person in your career and connecting in business sense?
Yeah, so I've come to the point now that I view myself as a transformational writer, coach, mentor, and I'm a Akashic practitioner as well. So the transformational writing just covers so much, and as I say, brings everything together. And I guess that comes from the fact I run two businesses. So I have the Butterfly Bureau, which is professional services for writers and authors, anyone wanting to get their story out there. And that covers everything from ghostwriting, as I say, mentorship, coaching. But it's also about the brand, getting the author brand out there as well. And then I have Gaia's Light, which is obviously a much more spiritual based practice. And originally I thought, well, I will run Gaia's Light for one day a week and I'll have my professional writing, the rest of the time. And then gradually over time, these two worlds and two businesses were becoming more and more intertwined. And then I realized that's where the magic happens, when the writing comes together with the healing. So, it's alchemy.
It really is. And look, I know through my own personal experience of working with you that that's also a case. And we'll get into that in a second, and obviously we're going to very much talk about the transformational side of the writing and the benefits of going into that. But like I said, we'll get into that in a second. But it's very interesting, like coming from such a professional, like the copywriting, the brand and marketing. We're talking very corporate, very
Yeah.
mainstream kind of work here, and obviously deputy editor of magazines and kind of like going through and saying yes, this is right, all these things. So it's very logical and going down that path. And like you said, now you've got these paths intertwined. But this is interesting. Like I suppose in a sense, someone could develop a passion for writing like yourself, and you kind of do see yourself go, yes, I can go into that field. But like you said, now it's intertwined. So where did the spiritual side come from? So we've got that side of like, yes, obviously you've got an interest of writing, you've gone down that, you've developed a wonderful professional career. So now you're saying they're intertwined, but where did this one stem from? Because I think this is the story most people don't really know or get to see. So this is a real privilege, but and even for me, I still don't know the full story. So I'm waiting with bated breath here. So where did this kind of stem from?
Okay, so I hope you've all got all night to talk. But no, but
in case you hadn't noticed, Evie have the mug in hand a little earlier before we.
So yeah, I mean, it really goes right back to the very beginning. I mean, so I was born in Scotland. You may not be able to tell because of my great Aussie accent, but I was born in Scotland.
That's right. We've got subtitles happening after this.
And my sort of start in life was a bit rocky, as was the case for a lot of people sort of born in Glasgow at that time. It might have been the swinging 60s, but there was a lot of hardship going on there as well. And my mother, actually, her parents were mediums. And but at a young age, she lost her mother and ended up in an orphanage with her brother. And my mum had had an experience of her mother coming to her and talking to her, when she was just a wee girl. And after she'd passed away, and she'd said to her dad, Mum came and spoke to me, and he said to her, tell her to go away. And this was a medium,
Yeah.
And yeah, so and then of course he couldn't manage, and he put them both in an orphanage. It was quite a common thing at that time. So during that process, my mum was really shut down, if you like. There's no talk of mediums in a Christian orphanage. It's just, if you write with the left hand, you get whacked,
Yeah.
So so I think my mum, she really suppressed that. But as I got older, my home life was pretty traumatic. I'll just leave it at that, but it was fairly chaotic and traumatic. And, I had an abusive stepfather. And so there was a lot going on. But the one thing that my mum did was teach me to write and read before I went to school. So that's one side of it. But what was also happening was there was a sort of awareness of things beyond normal reality.
Yeah.
And I was having dreams about things. I could sense an energy as soon as I walked in the room. I didn't see spirit. I never classed it as anything spiritual at that time, because I just thought I was sort of finely tuned to an environment, because you're sensing danger. So I had a logical explanation for all the experiences I was having, until it got to the point that I was having dreams about places that I'd never been to before. And and there was one particular occasion where I used to be a runner, and I had this dream about, this gun going off, and I was running, but I was running away from something. And then I just saw this vivid scene of, going over paddocks and over fences, and, I saw the complete scene, and I hadn't been there before. And then the next day, sure as fate, we traveled to go to this event, and the gun went off. And it was exactly as I'd seen it in my dream. Wow. And I had never been there. So there was things like that starting to, that I couldn't explain. So I was having these experiences, and then, as I say, my mum sort of told me about her parents and kind of said, maybe skips a generation, but it wasn't really, you don't talk about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so there was always an awareness, but it was really pushed to the side. And then as I got older, more and more things happened. And then, but it was actually through my writing, I guess, that I really tapped into something else. I was having experiences where and this was about 17, I was in a bedsit at the time. And, I would write till 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And so I was writing, and sometimes, if I was telling myself, I'm going to sit down and write, and I'm going to write this specific thing, it was always really hard work. But if I just sat there and thought, right, let's, whatever comes through, comes through. And I can only describe it as it felt like electricity. Sometimes I would just get all this stuff coming through, and I couldn't keep up with writing it, And I'd go to bed, and I'd get up in the next morning, and I'd look at it and I'd go, oh my God, that's really good. That's better than anything I could ever write, And I think, where's this coming from? Because it wasn't like I was sitting there consciously, sort of trying to connect with something. And then the most amazing thing happened years and years later, that, I basically found out that this was accessing Akashic records and information that I had stored for myself, basically, to bring forward.
Wow.
So the spiritual, there was always an interest. But because my story basically is that because I had this sort of challenging background at home, one thing that, as I say, kept coming through was the fact that, writing, I would naturally write, and I would naturally go somewhere else when I wrote,
Okay.
So,
yeah.
So, and I had, lots of experiences dreaming about things that would happen, 6 weeks later, and I would tell my mum about it, in case, because I
So
just
you
thought
you were talking to your parent a little bit about your writing?
A wee bit. I mean, it was a funny thing. It was like my mum acknowledged it and understood it, but we didn't really speak about it. But I would tell her dreams.
Sounds like me with my channeling.
Yeah. But it was almost like, so when this happens in 6 weeks, and I say, I dreamt about that, that I did, it was like that sort of, even then, wanting to validate it, know. But because I was very interested in the writing, and there was a real sort of what they call in narrative therapy, sort of a dominant story. So, it was actually an English teacher. I was mucking around in school because that was my release, from home. And she basically took me aside and said, you're a good writer. You could really do something with it if you just stop mucking about. And and it was a transformational moment, because it was like someone that actually believed in me in that way. And so it changed everything for me. So I focused completely on that being my journey and my path.
Yep.
And and so I tried to push the sort of spiritual side away, because at that time in Scotland, you were a nettle boiling hippie if you mentioned anything the least bit woo-woo,
Yes.
And so that just didn't come up in conversation.
Well, I suppose and first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for kind of taking us on that path and sharing that little bit about, because I know it's not easy talking about it, but I think it really does show, like, it's interesting, even though you were saying that, these two paths have started to entwine, they were from the beginning. I think they weren't even entwined, they were literally parallels trying to run together.
Yeah.
But that situation, it was just, the way it's happened.
The interesting thing is, and I think a lot of people will relate to this with the spiritual side of things, is you know, and especially if you want to move into that sort of area, it's this thing of there's a fear, you know, a judgment fear. And I've learned so much about fear and, you know, and how it actually stops us living our passion and being who we truly are. So I got to the point that I felt I was denying something about myself. So there was, you know, a select few people that knew that, you know, how my sort of philosophy on the world or on life. And I kind of had to find answers as to why all these things that had happened in my life at a very young age were happening to me, you know. And so there was, you know, a real sort of search for answers and to make sense of things. And so I was gathering this knowledge, you know, on one level and having the experiences on another level, but still keeping it very personal, very private, you know,
Yes.
and just you know, it wasn't really until I got that role on the magazine that, you know, I really blossomed because, you know, it was in natural health and it was very holistic.
Yeah.
And over time, of course, that brings in the spiritual aspect. You know, we were seeking basically with that publication to demystify complementary therapies. So that was a bit out there at that time.
Just for curiosity's sake, what time, because that's mean, I'm kind of fortunate because I've grown up in more of a more accepting world of this, you know, of the spiritual side and of course therapies. So just out of curiosity, what time, what kind of year are we looking at when this was starting to happen for you?
Yeah, so that would be early 90s.
Okay.
I mean, that was early 90s for the magazine,
Yep.
certainly.
So it was still, that's mean you really are mystifying, you're demystifying, trying to make it more
Yes,
common. Okay, so that's, yeah, that's
yeah. And the thing about it was, you know, we went into everything with an open mind, you know, and, you know, trying to sort of, because, you know, at that time, there was a real suspicion about it, but there was also a curiosity about it. So we were trying to represent it in the most authentic way that we could, you know, going out there and talking to people. And in hindsight, you know, that is actually where that I was totally in my passion in that job, because I was writing, you know, all day long. And then I was going out meeting so many people and getting the experience of all these different therapies and talking to different spiritual people about their beliefs and hearing people's stories. And I just, you know, I was really in my happy place there. And the people that I worked with were amazing because, you know, they shared the same passions. So,
it all kind of started to intertwine nicely and kind of bring and
yes.
allow you that. And that's me. Like, I love the fact, like even in this, like, you know, and I think so many people who are watching and listening can kind of relate of going through that. And you know, you're absolutely spot on with the fact of like there's that part, especially in that spiritual side of ourselves, of we do fear kind of needing to express that fear of
Yeah.
judgment of how other
Yeah.
people are going to perceive us or take
Mhm.
you know, are we going to lose a friendship or a relationship
Yes.
because of this
Yeah.
belief or whatever it may be? And that's not even necessarily meaning that you're going to do anything with it, like necessarily going off and being a reader or a healer.
That's
It's just
right.
about having a belief. And
Yeah.
yours was just you had experiences, you're looking for
Mm.
answers, and you know, obviously it's great that your writing was allowing you a nice safe haven to kind of, you
Yes.
know, allow that curiosity to grow, which is, you know, really, really fascinating. So, but it's interesting. So, you know, you've had all that and it's kind of, you've allowed that to evolve through that. But what's kind of interesting is, you know, I know that you've, you know, for probably almost 10 years now, you've been running your own kind of consultancy business
Mm.
and all that kind of stuff. But most of that, from my knowledge and understanding, it has been quite
Mm.
mainstream and corporate, which
Yes.
is
Yeah.
understandable. So that's fine. But now you really are bringing this back again. But I want to say, like, you're growing your wings here with allowing this to happen. So just I want to ask, and I'm interesting to know why the sudden change. Why do you feel this is the
Mm.
push? Why now? Why is this important for you?
So when I came to Australia, I got into another great role. It was away from sort of editorial. But it was in health. You know, it was still in health and medical. And in that role, you know, that again was another fantastic role where it was all about, you know, messaging across a global audience and all the rest of it. So while I was in that role, I I loved it because I felt like I was making a difference. The words that I was writing was helping someone. And even though it had a marketing slant, which I always say, you know, is using your powers for evil, it was like, it felt like I was still doing a good thing. You know,
Yeah.
I was helping to sell products that actually help save people's lives, you
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and so, you know, I got all this over, you know, the time that I was in Australia, I had all this extensive, fantastic experience. I learned, you know, I mean, I was obviously qualified in that area way back, but, you know, this was just like now I was really using it in like always like a grown up jobs, you know, and a real career, and I really just loved what I was doing. But then I got to a point that my soul wasn't being fed. You know, I thought I'm doing all this stuff for other people and big corporates, and you know, and copywriting. The thing about copywriting is it is corporate, so you don't have, you know, you're not allowed your personality or your point of view because you're the voice of the company.
Just quickly, I don't mean to interrupt, but just for
Yeah.
those who don't know copywriting, can you just give us a quick summation of what
Yeah.
copywriting is?
So copywriting is basically writing words that sell, you know. So, and you could be a copywriter in advertising. I did some advertising, but I was mainly a copywriter in marketing. So copywriting will be anything that you see on a brochure or on a website, or, you know, anything that's been written on behalf of a company. A copywriter is generally behind that.
Yeah.
So and it's more than just sort of sitting down writing. You know, you've got to kind of understand what competitors are doing, and you know, framing the words so that it's obviously not a direct you know, hit at the
Not
competitor.
plagiarizing.
Yes.
You're
Oh,
not copying.
absolutely. No, exactly. No, it's not a
It's not copyright.
copywriter. It sometimes gets confused with the legal aspect as well, which is quite
Yeah.
funny. But yeah, so you're basically writing words that sell, and there's an art to it. You know, there's a lot goes behind those words in a brochure or on a website. So, you know, that's what I was doing for a range of companies, and over time, you know, I realized that I liked the creative aspect of it. So I loved building, you know, or having the strategy side of websites and the whole communication sort of portfolio and how it all came together. So when you think about it, like between all the learnings that I had and the people that I met and everything else on the publishing side of things, and the studying that I did that went along with that, and then all the sort of global level work that I was doing on the copywriting and the strategy side of things, I mean, that is just such a huge resource to have at your fingertips, you know. And when it comes to, well, I have a message that I want to get out, and I have a passion, you know, I wanted to help other people. And it just got to a point of, okay, maybe it's time to use those skills in a way that I want to use them. You know, I'd always had this thing that I wanted to help people. I'd felt as if the experiences that I'd had through my life were meant to be used to help heal other people, basically.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to do that through writing my own books, you know, but it sort of changed.
But always there, we always
Yeah.
know spirit sometimes has different
Yes.
ways of getting things across. But it's
Yeah.
a kind of journey bringing that through, and I can't help because I did, because this is a story you shared with me during our process, and it still makes me laugh to this day. But it's a case in point, and you want to share that you had your own New Year's kind of resolution and intention that you say. Can you quickly share with everybody? Because you know, this is talk about you bridging into this and you wanting to
Yeah.
move into this way, and it's just to give a quick preload here. You know, Evie was very much of like, all right, I do want more of this, so I'm going to set some intentions, and then
Yes.
of course you went and set your intentions.
Yes, I did. So I decided that, okay, you know, I'm just going to pitch my stall here, and I'm going to say, right, please, universe, I'm opening myself up to more heart-centered businesses, you know, businesses that have got a message, I guess. You know, I wanted to work with people that had a bit of conscience about what they were doing. So I put it out there as a heart-based, you know, companies, thinking, you know, that I would get work coming in that was all about the things that I was passionate about, you know.
Yeah.
The very next gig that I got, without a word of a lie, it was about 3 days later, was I got a request to do some brand messaging and framework stuff for a medical company, and they were a heart-based catheter company, and I was like, what? I was like, not that sort of heart, not literally heart, you know, but that's how powerful your, you know, intentions and manifestations are. You've got to be very clear about, you know, what you're asking for. So.
Yeah. And we all, and I can't help it, but I love the fact that you've gone out there going, right, I'm going to put that out there. I'm going to ask for this heart-centered kind of business
exactly
work. And here you are being like, I'm good at branding and focusing the words and getting the message right, and you couldn't quite nail it for yourself in this one.
So yeah, I got what I asked for, but you know.
As you do, and as we do. But you know, but it is interesting, and obviously, you know, and a part of that is bringing that process of where our paths are crossed, and kind of bringing it across, because you know, it's the same thing. Like, I was in the middle of writing my book, my first book, when obviously, you know, I got the message from above saying, no, that's your second book, you've got to do this one. So. And obviously, it was a bit of a switch for me, and that's, you know, for those who aren't aware, that's where Evie and I kind of met, because we met on the professional basis of helping me kind of putting it all together, because it was just, it's foreign. Like, I have learned a lot now about the publishing realm, and I always liken it to people, as much as you can put it out there, but there is so much to it. There is absolutely so much to it, and I liken the publishing realm to the law realm and lawmakers and lawyers, because they have their own jargon, they have their own set of things, and the publishing world is very much the similar thing. So unless you're really in it and you know the lingo and you know what's going on, it's one of those things. And of course, our paths, you know, crossed. And what was this? The reason why this is so important, and it is a passion of mine, because I realised it, and believe it or not, it's actually through Evie that the Pearls of Wisdom's eventuated, because it's like, you know, everybody's got a story, and everybody has, you know, value to offer in their story through their experience, and that's a big part of it. And that's why this is kind of eventuated, and that's why I love it. And I love the fact, and this is just absolutely awesome, and it's kind of like I'm almost having a deja vu moment here of, you know, talking with you, Evie, about this and getting your story about something that you kind of helped me create in this space. And of course, the one thing that came from working through you know, my book and the manuscript of Searching Spirit was the healing. Now, I will say it was the furthest thing that I was thinking about of ever getting from writing a book. And I didn't see it as a goal or anything, but it was such a wonderful kind of byproduct, if you like, of the process. And this is when I've kind of said, you know, the whole thing here. So I'm like, Evie, you have such a gift and a talent for bringing all this out. And you know what? And I love the fact, and I really haven't voiced it publicly enough, is that, you know, there were moments of truth where all of a sudden you're telling your story, and it's amazing how you have a version of truth.
Yeah.
And, you know, and there was a moment there, and I was like, I did, but I loved it. Like, Evie you were so in my corner going, you know, hang on, you got to be careful. Like, you don't need to change things around. This is you, Pete. This is your version of truth. And it's amazing. Like, I'm thinking, wow, like, what a lesson for me in understanding this. And I suppose this is what we talked about, the narrative kind of writing, and bringing in the transformational writing. So, and this is what, you know, we want to have a look at, and I really want to show people the power in this. And that's me. I got it unwillingly and unexpectedly, and it's such a blessing in disguise for me personally, because I'm like, it did. I was like, I wasn't expecting it, but I got it, and I'm thinking, there's so much power in people telling their story. Yeah. And this is where it kind of comes in. So, you know, when we talk about transformative writing, all this kind of stuff, like what is healing through writing? What is this transformative writing? Can you explain this for people?
So healing through writing works on so many levels. I mean, any form of creativity is inspiration, you know, it's a connection to you know, whether it's our higher self or, you know, a higher source. So the way I view it is writing works on the emotional level, you know, the mind, body, spirit, basically. So you have the emotional release of actually just writing something down on the page, you know. And I mean, like for someone like myself as a kid, I didn't realize that I was naturally healing myself by writing about things when stuff was going on, and I was helping my emotional health and my mental health, but I didn't realize that at the time. You know, this is just looking back. And then of course there's the sort of physical aspect of writing, and we store emotions and memories, and you know, they're trapped in our body because we attach emotions to every experience to make sense of that story that we tell ourselves. So that's how we become so you know, almost dependent on them, that this story is who we are. But sometimes if it's not a, you know, a positive story or aligned with our soul purpose or where we want to be, you know, and we have negative associations, well, that can show up in the body, you know. So whether it's unexplained pain or migraines or, you know, stomach ache, you know, people hold fear and emotion in different places. So through writing, you can actually explore that and, you know, release it. And sometimes you need the help of, you know, extra people in your team, you know, but on a basic level you can do that. And then of course there's the writing that connects you to who you are, you know, your story, and you've kind of got to get out of your way to write that story, you know. Sort of put your sort of when I say your ego, I mean like the ego self, you know, the logical brain, to the side, and just allow whatever comes through to come through. And as I say, that can just be, you know, sometimes you could write something, go, wow, I didn't realize I felt that way about that subject, you know. And it could just be a free sort of flowing sort of form of consciousness that you're writing. And then other times you can actually sort of connect, you know, whether it's accidentally or on purpose, but, you know, actually start to channel messages or whatever else through your writing. So for some people, that's the very first time they're channeling, and, you know, they don't realize it. So to be healing, you know, has all those levels. So, you know, if you're talking about transformational writing, you're talking about an awakening. You're talking about, you know, having an awareness of what your story is. Then you're having, you know, you're exploring it. So you're healing, and then you're growing, and then you're transforming. You know, that's generally the sort of path as I see it. And of course, there's a wide range of sort of writing that you can do. It doesn't always have to be a memoir, you know, it could be something very short, you know, just words on a page. So, you know, a lot of people get scared by the idea of writing, you know, because, oh, I wasn't good at it at school, or, you know, they've got some negative sort of story that they have around writing. But you don't have to, this is the beauty of it, you don't have to be a good writer to heal from writing. It's just another tool to access what's inside, you know.
I think that's an important point to make. It's not about necessarily writing to be published, or it's not writing for the public eye. But I do want to ask one quick question, because it's, you know, it's a thought that runs through my head. And obviously, you know, I always say if I have this question, somebody else will be having this question. Now, obviously, we're talking about transformational writing and kind of getting in this and writing this. But, you know, and of course, you're a writer, so this is an important question for you. You might be a bit biased on one side here, but we'll work with it. But the whole point is like, okay, what do you see as like an advantage? Because, you know, obviously we know there's psychologists and counselors we can talk to. We can actually talk through this. What do you see as like a real kind of important difference between like going and speaking about it versus actually like writing through a process or healing through it?
Well, this is something I'm really passionate about, actually, because when you take it to the extremes of trauma, you know, if someone's actually, whether they have trauma as a child or as an adult, sometimes they can't actually even verbalize that, you know. And I know we have, you know, we're so used to being able to actually go and speak to a therapist, but for some people, that is, you know, going to a therapist is like the bravest thing they've ever done. You know, that is a really hard thing
Very
to do,
true.
to sit in front of someone and, you know, you have to tell them your stuff or else they can't help you, you know.
Mm.
But before you're ready for that, you have to acknowledge some things yourself, you know. So the safest way to do that is writing. And the way I like to think about it is, so if take a very young child, for example, that say they can't verbalize what happened to them, they just can't, you know, speak it out, the words won't come. But if you give them a piece of paper and a crayon or a pen or whatever else,
Yeah.
and you ask them to just describe how they feel or just write what they want, you know, it's like writing actually goes into that sort of darkest place and gradually sort of, you know, holds your hand and draws you out, whether it's a word on the page or a feeling, you know, anything, just a mark on the page. And then what that does is, as soon as something's on a page, it gives it form, it gives it its
Yeah.
physical, and that can be acknowledged then. So I'm really passionate about that side of things, you know. And
It just becomes tangible, doesn't it? It's like all of a sudden it's
yes,
no longer
yeah,
running around up here in our thought and
yeah,
our brain. Because I always say that to some people, like when doesn't matter even just the smallest of thing. Like you could be
yeah,
writing down a goal or aspiration,
yes,
but you know,
yeah,
it's funny. Like we can, I don't know necessarily like sometimes we don't fool ourselves, but we can talk ourselves around things in our
yeah,
minds. But
yeah,
then, like when you get it down on paper,
mm,
you know, it's like it's tangible. It's like, oh, well, this is real now. It's, you know,
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
very, very powerful thing.
And then there's the healing, you know, from our sort of, you know, our day-to-day experiences. We have a shared human experience. And, you know, for example, you know, it's a bit of a joke in my, I think I'm the Elizabeth Taylor in my family because I'm on to my third marriage. And this is third time lucky, you know, that's what I say. If I get this wrong, you know, forget it. But, you know, divorce, you know, so I've experienced divorce twice and, you know, I never want to go through that experience again. But the one thing about divorce is they were two very different experiences. So no divorce is ever the same experience, but writing kind of helped me through that. And there's various ways that you can do that. And one of my favorites, and I know it maybe doesn't sound very spiritual, but it works, is the angry journal. And it's basically, you know, and you would use this in your early stages of, and you just write anything that comes in your head, you know, how you feel, the things you wish you'd said, the things they said, you know. And it's basically just I like to visualize it that you're actually lifting that stuff out of your head, out of your body, and you're making it physical on
Make
a
it
page.
physical. Yeah.
And then no one will ever see that, you know. But if you're a writer, of course, you'll keep that for material at a later point, you know.
I can see that in you, that little gleam in your eye right there. Go, I'll keep that for material
Yes,
a little bit
yes,
later. Honestly, that was, you could totally see. Like, it's wise to keep that just in case you want to go back and revisit it.
absolutely. So first, you know, primary source material. So,
But
you
it
know,
just
it's
so yeah, so it's obviously that's me. It's great because it kind of gets it out there. So, and I'm just you know, obviously if anybody who's watching this, it sounds great, and I think sometimes it's like, you know. Can you give like a couple of pointers on how someone might be able to start this, you know, by themselves? Because
yeah,
of course, you know, not everybody, again, like you said, oh, but I'm not really a writer, you know, so
yeah,
immediately there's going to be this block or this
yes.
subconscious fear of stopping them. So have you got any, like, if someone who's watching going, you know what, I like the sound of this,
Mm,
obviously the great things, like you said, this is something that they can do like on their own, in their own time,
mm,
without like needing to, you know, necessarily talk to someone. I
mm,
think it allows you to kind of look at yourself, reflect on yourself, in a
mm,
way, talk to yourself in private,
yeah.
so you can reflect and acknowledge. What do you have any like hints or tips on how someone might be able to get started on this process?
Yeah. I mean, it's like everything, isn't it? There's a spectrum of experience. So, you know, there's some people who actually choose to write a memoir about that specific experience because it will help other people. But if you've never written, you know, and you feel like, oh, I can't write, then the thing to remember is forget that it's writing, because no one's judging grammar, no one's looking at sentence structure. You could just be
No
writing a
grammar
shopping
police.
list. Yeah. I mean, that gets totally in the way of the healing process. This
Yeah.
is where, the two things are, should be separate. And it's like what I was saying earlier about having that ego brain, the logical brain, the analytical brain. Just get that out of the way. And you can literally start with and this is the simplest thing to do. If you've never written and you think you hate writing, even, if you remember an experience or you're going through an experience, just get a scrap of paper and just write down anything that you're feeling, whether it's something emotional, whether it's anger. It could be, just a whole load of, I've got to go shopping today. I don't really feel like it. And I know that sounds a bit mundane, but as soon as you open that up, you will be amazed that, over time, that wee scrap of paper, it might be filled with a load of, what you think is nonsense. You can fold that up, put it in an envelope, put it away, never have to look at it again. But over time, you will find that it's like it opens the floodgates. Before you know it, you've written a paragraph, or then you've written a page, or then you've sat and you thought, well, I'll write a few pages this morning, just almost like a daily journal, which is a really good thing to do. Because there's research to suggest that if you write a journal and you repeat the process every day, even if it's just half an hour, it's really beneficial. So it's beneficial for your well-being, your blood pressure. There's a lot to be said for actually working through some of these things, because then you can release it. And then you can look back, 6 months from then. And this is another fantastic thing. If you kept a journal, is you can look back and say, wow, I survived that, that I was really miserable at that point. So then what you have is evidence that you're a survivor, and that in itself, when you're having a bad day and you look at that and you think, well, I got over that. I felt pretty crappy then, but I got through it. So these are the sort of subtle ways you're healing yourself, because now that story that you're telling yourself isn't about, what a failure you are, or what a terrible person you are, or whatever else. It's, well, that was tricky, but and it was, some days I didn't want to get out of bed, but I did it, and so
it's so true, because I think it's something that is completely underestimated and underrated in the fact of being able to reflect. Because sometimes we're so caught up in like just the moment in the present, obviously the daily dealings of the struggle that we may be going through. But being able to look back, I suppose, it's nice to know that it shows you, yes, you are a survivor. It shows you do have that strength. And that's so not just healing, but that's very empowering.
Yes.
To allow you to move forward. And I think that's me, even for myself. Like I know, going through that process of writing a memoir, of actually going through and that was only just from one point to point, and I hadn't even covered even some of the what I call the exciting stuff,
Yeah.
But you don't realize how much you've actually accomplished.
Yeah, it's exactly till you write it down.
It's so funny, because it's almost like you just rack it up to, oh, that's just that happened.
Yeah.
And you don't see the ability to kind of, break that down. So there's some awesome tips to kind of get started, but just being mindful. That the great thing is, and I know I pushed you on this, but it's awesome that you're kind of doing it. But you are now starting your healing and transformation through writing courses, are you not?
Yes, I am.
Please tell us more.
So through the the Akashic record stuff that I do as well, I was becoming aware that people have, we all have stories, we all have patterns that we're trying to move through, and we want to basically change our story. And what I found when I did the workshops in January, it was one of those situations where I went in there to talk about, this is how you structure a memoir, and this is, all the steps. But then I was introducing elements of opportunities of healing, because a lot of people get sort of bogged down in the fear. So can you hear? That's my dog dreaming. If you hear any weird noises. Sorry. So people get caught up in the fear, and then it became a bit of a sort of, you know, exploring that on a healing level, and then being able to come back to the writing. It's like, it gets that kink out the wool, to be able to talk through it. So I realized that the healing and the writing really worked well together in its own right, not just, me sort of dabbling in both, at the same time. That actually worked as a discipline together. So these courses that I'm doing are all about basically not only will you get all the skills and the information that you need to see a project through to the end, like a memoir, but anything that you're sort of struggling with on a sort of emotional level, I actually, will take time to work through that with you as well, because I want to see the book succeed, or that piece of writing succeed. So, don't just say, oh, it's too hard. Let's see where it's hard, and then we work through it. So because, so it's a bit of a framework for that experience. So so I've got the sort of magical memoir type course coming up, and it's really just the foundations of writing a memoir, but also looking at your story. And, is that actually the story that you want to write about in your memoir? So the course is all about that. And then I have another course about actually writing in the Akashic records for people that want to, really sort of explore that spiritual side.
Well, that's mean I can totally vouch for the memoir route, because it's like, you do like, and it's honestly, it's wonderful having someone along on the process to, like, because you work through things, but it's just like kind of jogging. And what I have to admit is, the one thing I loved about your method was that it's not invasive, and it's not, you're not poking and prodding to get to a core problem. You're just simply going, so just, I want to know a little bit more about this. What happened here? And all of a sudden you go, and at the time you go, oh, well, actually, let me think about that for a second. And you start to recall details, and then all of a sudden it's amazing, because all of a sudden more information starts to kind of get drawn out. By no means is it, invasive or quite, it's just like, it just kind of starts to pour out of you a little. But just, I think a few people be asking, it just means it's a wonderful, like, magical memoir. Like, what a great name for a course. You can tell someone might have had a helping hand in getting that branding right with that one. But no, but it's absolutely wonderful. But I just want to point out, like, if someone looks at this, obviously, if someone mentions memoir, that sounds pretty intense, and it sounds pretty full on. So who is it designed for? Who would you recommend would jump on something like this?
So it's basically for anyone that has a story to share, message. The thing about memoir is all about transformation, and starting at a point A, and then the journey is point B, and the transformational point is at point C. And it actually really doesn't matter whether you think that your writing skills are up to the job. Is, do you have a story? Because if you have a story and you have a message to share, then everything else can be worked out, basically. And that can be as slow and as methodical a process as you like, being comfortable as you go, or it can be like a bit of mentoring and a crash course, and here you go, see how you get on. And I like people to if they're actually interested in learning what it takes to write, that's one thing, that's a different aspect of it. But if they just have a story to share, and they think it might help other people, and they found some healing within it themselves, then the memoir side of things is definitely for them. But there's other forms of writing, poetry, and I can help people get started with that sort of stuff. It's not about being technically fantastic at poetry. It's about what the symbolism and messaging is for you. So there's, as I was saying earlier, quite a spectrum, and it's about meeting you where you're at, really.
Yeah, so that's it's an interesting part. And like, obviously, if someone is thinking about wanting to jump on either the Magical Memo or the Akashic Record, is
Yeah.
this something that is you're doing? Like, is it in groups? Is it individual? How would
Mhm.
this work if someone's interested in?
Yeah, so there'll be a range of options. So basically, if someone wants one-to-one mentoring through different stages of the process, that's going to be an option. But in fact, I've put some notes already on my website. So it's a case of, if they were interested in looking at the notes and feeling into whether that was something they'd be interested in doing. And as I say, it could either be one-to-one or like on Skype or whatever else as it is for everything at the moment, or Zoom.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll also be doing workshops, when we can get to the point that we can have greater numbers together. But yes, for the most part, it would be online, and and I'd be sort of heavily involved in that as a one-to-one. It's not just a case of, here's your worksheets, get on with it, sort of thing.
But and that's me. I think it's nice for people to know, and I think, and again, you make the valid point of, and I think the one thing I'd like also to stress is obviously through my experience and connecting and working with you personally as well, is that people. I just want to point out for people who are listening and watching that. You may not think you have a story, you may not think you have a message, but the thing is like there is something in that, and I believe, like, we all will heal in some shape or form, and through that healing is the story and the message in itself,
Mhm.
because it's the same thing. I think, there's so many people who can relate, but if not, I honestly believe that, just helping yourself is one thing, but then just by finding that your own voice and your own story, your own truth, I
Mhm.
strongly believe that you can start to inspire others. And that's why it's bringing on here. And I love the fact, I'm connecting with so many wonderful people with the Pearls of Wisdom and the Pearls of Wisdom podcast, and like, people like yourself and your journey,
Mm.
and it's amazing in that hearing your story, and just tonight on bringing that through, so
Yes.
it's one of those things. But if someone is interested, where are they supposed to go? Evie, tell us where they're supposed to go for this one. How can they get in
Um,
contact with you? How can they find out more?
so if they go to the Butterfly Bureau, that is sort of the hub of all the writing, the pure writing stuff, the transformational writing stuff. And so that is, if you just type in the Butterfly Bureau for profession, I think it's for professional writers, that'll come up with that, and just find me there. Alternatively, if you're sort of interested in the more sort of spiritual aspects of writing, then that would be Gaia's Light. So yeah, on the website, and I'm also on Facebook. So yeah, I'm all over. Social. Just type one of my names in, I'll pop up.
That's a, it's a, you've got a few options, you'll find her eventually on the Google search button there. But it's all right. But the
Yeah.
Butterfly Bureau is obviously for the more the professional kind of side of things.
Yeah, and it's more about the sort of building the brand, and if you want the actual structure, or without the sort of healing and spiritual aspect, I would say.
Yeah, and obviously, if someone's looking for a little bit more spiritual
Yeah.
line of it, or kind of twist on the writing aspect, Guy's Light
Yes.
is going to be the place to go and see you with that as well. So, well, it's come to that point, but I just want to say thank you so much for your time, your story, your own inspiration, your journey, and obviously all the valuable and awesome information that you've provided with us tonight, Evie. I cannot thank you enough.
It's been a
I
pleasure.
again, I'm proud of you because I know this is outside your comfort zone. But it's great.
It is.
You're embracing yourself. It's just so awesome to see. Honestly, you are gifted in more ways than one, and it's so wonderful that you are using all your gifts and abilities to now bring other people, heal people, and inspire
Yeah.
others forward as well. So and I think sometimes it may not be as evident that you might see things, but you really do. You are another pebble in the pond that causes a ripple across many lives. So never
Mm.
doubt the power that you do help people with. So, and of course, I have no doubt there are many more to come.
Mm.
So again, thank you so much, everybody. And of course, if you feel free to share this, will be on YouTube, is on obviously on Facebook, and you can find it also on my website, peterwilliamsmedium.com. So you can come back and view this at any time. And of course, feel free to share with any of your friends or family who may enjoy it as well. So, yeah, again, thank you so much, Evie, and I look forward to getting updates with you in the future.
Thank you.
Have a good night. See ya.
See ya.